everyone, and welcome back to Overwatch Lately, where you'll learn everything that's been going on in Overwatch lately. Today, we have Jenna LemonKiwi Pachette, one of my good friends in the casting world, someone that you've seen all over Contenders as well as Elo Hell. How is it going, my friend?
Good. I just want to say, super impressed. I look like I'm on TV right now with just the little tickers and my giant face, and even the drum roll music. I'm super hyped.
It gets you hyped up. So let's go ahead and just start doing this thing. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is probably the biggest news that dropped in Overwatch. Is the 2020 schedule got announced, and everyone is having a home game. At least 10 games will be hosted by each of the teams. Some other teams, I think, have up to 20-something games, and so we're all really, really excited for it. So my first question to you, Lemon, is your initial feelings on the schedule and which ones you might actually be going to.
Well, let's start with the positives, that this is just so amazing to bring esports to a live setting and a more reoccurring, not just here like twice a year event, something that I don't know how often these are. They look pretty often, several times a month. So wherever you are in the world, you can participate in Overwatch. Not everyone has to fly to LA for BlizzCon. These are all over the world. And this kind of gets people away from going to Twitch and being at home. They can actually interact with their community, and it can take people maybe who aren't Twitch savvy to a real setting. And I've always been one who's loved to watch sports in person rather than on TV. And I think this will have the same feeling, that it'll attract more fans towards the game.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think something that I also think that goes understated is it's going to bring these players to their hometown teams, right? And so if you're playing for the Guangzhou Charge or the Hangzhou Spark, you're no longer communicating across an ocean. You're going to be there interacting with those fans who've been following you in California this whole time. And the other thing I think is going to be cool is a lot of these players are going to get to live in some pretty sweet places, because if you happen to be an international player on a Chinese team, you're going to be spending a lot of time in Asia.
And that's where it's a little bit concerning that, you have to be minimum of 18 to be part of the Overwatch League. And maybe as an 18-year-old, just having to be on tour, if you will, kind of all year, or I didn't actually look at how long this was.
Majority of it, yeah.
Majority of the year, you're traveling to country, to place, and there's maybe some downtime, but I'm a little bit concerned with burnout. But it seems like overall, if there's a good mental coach infrastructure to keep up with the mental health and kind of give them the breaks that they need, this is such an amazing experience for someone to play video games like this all over the world.
I mean, it really feels like it's worldwide now, right? This is something that's been branded for Overwatch League ever since its inception, and we finally get to see it realized. And this has been a dream for a lot of us involved in Overwatch, not just professionally, but as an audience member as well. So let's circle back just real quick. Are you going to be attending any of these homestands?
I'm in Vegas, so I'm in the middle of just all these different types of teams. I haven't picked my home team. Obviously, the LA ones are a quick drive away, so I'm definitely going to check out those ones. But I don't know if I'd have to see how good they really are to travel like outside the country, like into Paris or whatnot. But maybe I'll squeeze one trip into like a faraway one just to kind of visit the country and have the excuse of also watching more Overwatch. So.
I know. I really loved what Overwatch League did for their advertising. They're like, you want to spend Valentine's Day in this city? Well, the next day you're going to have Overwatch League games to go to. And I think for a lot of us people who are really into gaming and going to these events, it's kind of like the ticket. Right? We've all wanted to go to Paris, right? A lot of people want to go to Paris, but now there's a reason to go outside of just wanting to be there. And I think that's going to be providing a lot of incentive for international travel as well. And I'm just really excited to see these hometowns really start coming up and coming in for their teams, because it's not just everyone in California anymore. So everyone's really excited. I think people are concerned about the burnout, but I think there's also the other side of it where, like, say you're playing on a Chinese team, a lot of them are going to be Korean, and they're going to be much closer to home and going to be able to travel back home a little bit easier. But it's going to be give and take depending on who you're playing for. But that's going to be it for that homestand stuff. Let's move on to something that you're pretty familiar with, which is Contenders. You got to cast the premier region, Korean Contenders, and you got to see the best of the best play. But unfortunately, something that wasn't the best of the best was Fusion University this year. Just for everyone at home who is unaware, Fusion University was competing in North American Contenders. They won 30 games in a row. they lost a game this last season. And after they secured an extra spot for North America at the Gauntlet, they moved over to Korea to really test their mettle. And a lot of people thought that they were going to be able to get top 2 here, but that wasn't the case, Lemon.
It's weird what happened to Fusion Uni. Obviously, everyone was kind of shocked that they went to Korean contenders. So there's always that thing of they've only been scrimming NA teams until this point, which everyone can say is maybe not as tough competition compared to, let's say, there's a larger pool of talent in Korea. So going into there, they're still the Game 5 kings or queens and people. There's Game 5 against Runaway in the first week. That was the match of the season. But they've been hit by Game 5 all regular season. But instead of winning them all like they did in LA, they've been almost losing every Game 5 in the regular season. So they almost barely made playoffs in the first place. And then their first opponent was Runaway. And I think this match was a lot different than week 1 because Fusion Uni went through some roster changes. There's also a 2-2-2 meta enforced in playoffs, which wasn't at the start of the regular season. And Fusion Uni have been stuck into kind of that 3-3. And although they have great DPS players, they had some support lineup changes. Fuse came in sort of middle of the regular season where I noticed I casted his first game that he appeared, and it was kind of, he didn't fit on like a glove, he had to still warm up to the team. And then the next game I casted with Fuse on, he felt a lot better and he looked a lot better for the team. But in a 2-2-2, Runaway made specific pickups to prepare for 2-2-2 with Yaki and Assassin. They look amazing, and Fusion Uni are just kind of trailing behind. It's not that they're a bad team. It's just Korean teams with their coaches and everything that they're used to this competition. They're just head and shoulders above. And it's sad to say that Fusion Uni got like 4 spots for NA, and now you won't see them in Gauntlet. It's insane.
Well, and if they had stayed in North America, I think the easy assumption would be that they would be in the Gauntlet, no problem. They probably would have competed for first place. It wouldn't have just been the story of Envy in Atlanta the whole time. Fusion University would be a part of there too. So, in your opinion, after seeing them play, I'm assuming they're going to stay in Korea because when all those new rules got announced, they're like, "Oh, Fusion University has roots in Korea." Do you see them finding a little bit more success next season after one season here already?
Well, it still goes to their reason that they went to Korea is to build around their Korean roster, and a lot of their NA players, Zachary and all that, have moved up to OWL. So I think they're really attached to their Korean squad, and I think the import rules wouldn't even, let's say beyond import rules, if they wanted to switch back to NA roster to come back to NA, I'm kind of biased. I would be super stoked to see the Fusion Uni versus everyone rivalry. It would be so much more on brand with Philadelphia Fusion, kind of the NA brand, but it's kind of nice to see them being challenged for once because, Boop, we've seen NA contenders Fusion Uni just kind of roll everything. It's a little bit boring. And then now you're seeing them kind of go through some issues. So I kind of like seeing them struggle and develop into a better team over in Korea.
Well, I think that's something that was a little bit of a theme that ZP and Avast, I think, started and Fusion University's last season in North America was a lot of these teams need to learn how to lose, right? Because if you haven't lost in a very long time, you have to go through that process over and over again and really learn from it. And they didn't get to do that in North America. They lost that one game to Mayhem Academy, but that was it, right? And that was after a 30-game win streak. And to me, that almost felt like a relief for them. The weight was lifted off of their shoulders. And now that they're consistently going up against teams that are just as good as them, there's no way that they're not going to get better, right? And so going into next season, how are expectations? Do you think they might finish in the same kind of pack? I know the meta is going to be totally different. We're not going to see another contender season until next year, but what is your crystal ball kind of telling you for Fusion University?
It's tough. I don't know where this is going to go. There's a big shift in the tanks that are going to happen when Sigma gets introduced, I'm assuming next year in contenders. So that could also be which teams are going to adapt to introducing Sigma and then what other hero changes. So Fusion Uni, it's not even the raw talent that they have issues with. I think they have a solid enough lineup. Obviously, I don't know what leadership issues they have, maybe within the game or outside the game, friendships or not. But individually, they look amazing on paper. But what I've noticed is that coming together as a team hasn't always been that way in the game. And for them to consistently go to game 5 for how long, it means that they have strengths in certain areas and they're very, very weak in others. And you need to be overall consistent. You don't have to be the best at everything, but you need to be great at everything if you want to stay at the top of the pack. And if Fusion Uni don't figure out those gaps and those weaknesses, they'll still be a bottom. I hate even saying that, a bottom
the air quotes,
team in
right,
Korea.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. It's I think a lot of teams all over the world, and not just in esports, right? Just professional sports teams like in the NFL. When you have a really good quarterback, right, in the NFL, that's not the end all be all, right? You need a good support system around them too. And you might be able to have a star and build off of that, but if there are definite weaknesses other places, you're going to see them eventually, especially if you're going to game 5 all the time, because then that, you know, that tiredness comes creeping in, and then that's when the mistakes start really happening. And with your Fusion University, you know, you're playing a lot more Overwatch than a lot of other teams are because of those game 5s.
I hope to see them do much better, and they're still figuring out their tank situation with Chongsik and Beast Halo. Remember, like back in the day, Beast Halo was like their starter. I was a big fan of Beast Halo. Now you kind of barely ever see him because he was maybe more of your Winston specialist, and that's fallen more and more out of the meta. And that's where someone like Chongsik has had to play better alongside Bernard. So again, individually, they look great, but it's all up to how the meta will shape up next season, because I really think it's them not being a little bit slower on the ball when it comes to the 2-2-2, while as, you know, Runaway and all the other teams have been preparing for 2-2-2, it seems, since the beginning.
Yeah, and the foresight was definitely evident for a lot of the Korean teams. I know I was talking to AVRL last week, and he was like, O2 Blast apparently have been practicing 2-2-2 forever at this point, and that's just going to make them super scary come the Gauntlet, assuming that they make it. And so let's move on from contenders just for a little bit. We'll get back to the Gauntlet, but I wanted to talk just a tad bit about the Kit Kat Rivalry Weekend coming up this weekend, and there's going to be a lot of really good games here, but you're kind of associated with the Dallas Fuel, so let's start with the sad stuff first, and then we'll get to the exciting stuff when it comes to the rivalry weekend. Dallas Fuel might finish 0-7, and they came in with a little bit of hype over the last couple stages, and throughout, especially this stage, it just seems to really fall apart. I mean, they did have to go through the longest pause in Overwatch League history. I mean, I feel like if I focused on it, I could have solved world hunger during that pause.
Yeah.
But I was too lazy to actually do anything about it. But yeah, 0-7. You work with the Fuel at times. You were at the homestand when they were hosting it, and what's your general feeling of it all?
I feel like it's one of those teams that have more of a very, very long-term goal and are slower at improving and figuring things out. And again, I don't know why it's taking a while to do these things. And you think there's a lot of players on their bench right now that they're still figuring out who should be off the bench and not. Like Mickey had his first appearance in over a year for a map 4, and I wonder why. Was that a pity map, as Avast likes to say, or was this general? They're curious to incorporate Mickey back into the lineup. And even as a general viewer, you might wonder, okay, well, Dallas Fuel had this what's that little comic that they do with the
I don't know the name of it, but I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? Their little cartoon that they do. Well, they have players on the bench that are part of that cartoon, and you can't exactly trade the players that you have a contract with this cartoon with. And I don't know how long the contract with the cartoon is, but maybe they're kind of stuck with what they have right now because they haven't really done any changes. So I expect the offseason hopefully they're going to figure out the final roster that they want to go with, what is working for them, and move forward into how they can make this roster work, because it hasn't worked all stage. But you've seen Hastro tweet that they have, even Jane and Hastro and other people, that this is a team that looks farther into the picture, like farther down the road with long-term goals, and it doesn't seem like they expect to solve it in the stage.
Well, and I think that's actually really smart, right? It's not like at stage 1 where you could solve these things. Contenders is going on, right? Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, let's pick up these guys. And everyone seemed to be pretty happy with the pickup of Trill, but he's kind of a really good example, too, of how different Contenders and Overwatch League can be, because the growing pains were definitely there for him. And he was arguably one of the best players in Contenders at the time and one of the easiest pickups to move up. Yeah. I know that's the man that a lot of people said, if you were to pick one player in Contenders contenders at the time, it was Trill. And now that he's not, maybe he needs the ping. No one knows. But I think you're right, though. It's like you got to start future-proofing, right? It's, okay, the stage is already over, right? We're probably going to go 0-7. And so instead of trying to win this last game, let's go ahead and start thinking about our organization as a whole. And I think that you're right. I think it's good for them to look at it, again, as a big picture type of situation going into next season and starting to identify exactly where those low points are and how to make sure that those aren't repeated. But the important thing is they have to learn from it first. So enough about the sad stuff when it comes to Dallas Fuel. Let's talk about a little bit more of an argument here is who the best California team is. And so you've got the Shock, which I think a lot of people would say. You've got Gladiators and you've got the Valiant. So who's your favorite of those three? And do you think anyone, I think the Shock are the best of those three. Do you think anyone could compete against the Shock come playoff time?
I think Shock are just that much better than the rest, but it's cool that you have three teams in that region. There's such a huge rivalry there, but Shock, especially in this 2-2 DPS meta, they're ready for it, and I think that's easily the best Cali team there.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the individual matchups of a Kit Kat rivalry weekend because there are some really good ones. And about 4 or 5 weeks ago, this first one, New York Excelsior versus Vancouver probably would have been the one everyone was really looking at. But New York Excelsior doing what they do at the end of a season, which is lose. And so the other games that I thought were pretty cool were Gladiators and Valiant, the California rivalry, as well as San Francisco and the Valiant. And then I think what everyone might be looking at is the San Francisco-Vancouver matchup. Does your favorite game fall in one of those four, and why would you be excited for it?
I think the obvious one has to be Shock versus Titans or the San Francisco versus Vancouver. It's the two best teams right now in the stage in the league going up against each other. And although it doesn't have anything to do with the LA rivalry, that's the match that I think is going to be the closest and the most entertaining. But then, like you said, the Gladiators versus Valiant kind of refortifying who is the best LA team, because before it was Gladiators, then Valiant kind of came up, then Valiant started losing, and then Gladiators. So it's been so back and forth how these teams have had good and bad stages. So I don't know who to cheer for in that sense. I don't want to pick one.
Well, and the thing about rivalries too is it's an extra special sauce that happens in it. People tend to try like way harder, and like the pressure can really start getting to you, and people make mistakes.
People like boo and stuff.
Yeah, I love it.
Sucks.
But, yeah, but like you go up there and you've got thousands of people booing you, right? That's gonna hurt the mental boom. But if you're a true fan of a team, I mean, that's kind of what you got to do. And so I agree. I think San Francisco, Vancouver, I'm actually really excited for Gladiators Valiant, because then it's like, I feel like they're fighting for the second best team in California at that point in time. And I think just, again, the California versus California dynamic, it's pervasive throughout all sports. LA usually has two teams, like Clippers, Lakers, and you got the Chargers and the Rams and a bunch of other California-based teams going up against each other. And that's just the pageantry I love to see coming into esports, because I think that is a really great way to create that bridge from traditional sports to incorporate new fans. And you've also got the special Kit Kat. I think there's a special flavor they're premiering at Kit Kat Rivalry Weekend.
Really?
Yeah,
I love Kit Kat. You just blew my mind.
And so, that's pretty cool too. But let's go ahead and start talking about contenders again. Everyone's really excited about Kit Kat Rivalry Weekend, but I'm really excited about this latest pickup from Vancouver. And the reason why I mentioned contenders is because Tsitsi was someone who participated in contenders, and a guy that both you and I have been watching over the years. And what do you think about this pickup?
It's maybe people question it a little bit, maybe not. So I'll start with the bads and go to the goods, kind of close it out in the right way. So he was on GZA, remember Contenders China Season 1, where that team didn't do so hot. They looked really good on paper. They had Nero and even Tizzy on the team, and they just bottomed out. Didn't look good at all. Had no idea why, maybe internally language barriers or whatnot. Contenders China wasn't a good look for him, but if you kind of scroll back before he went to Contenders China, he was on XL2, the good version of XL2, where they got second and, have been top placing multiple times. So looked really good on XL2, and I'm really glad to see him join his former teammates of Runaway back on Titans. So I think this is a great pickup. Main tank player, those are hard roles to come by. So I think they're grabbing people, getting ready for the off season, maybe doing some roster moves.
Yeah, and so I know we didn't discuss this a little bit earlier, but my question to you is like, so Goats, I think, really showed off a lot of tank players, right? And so if you're a tank player now, when you're pretty much playing Orisa most of the time, and you're going to be playing some Sigma a little bit later, do you think chances are if you're a tank player currently in contenders to move up into Overwatch League? Because I think Goats was just, hey, look at this Reinhardt, man. He can make plays and he can move up because it's just easier to see. Do you think this meta might affect how tank players might get promoted, or do you think it's going to be kind of the status quo, and if you're good, you're going to get up?
I think so many main tank players got picked up this contender season. It felt like this was the season of contenders that the most NA players got yoinked to Overwatch League. Like Trill, to the Fuel, you had Fact Fiction, Mayhem Academy. Like there's so many main tanks that got yoinked up, and it's not a surprise that Tizzy got picked up as well. But the main tank has such an important role in Goats in the 3-3 because your Reinhardt or whoever was the one leading it. And now in an Orisa Halt Hook, it's not as... if you mess up as an Orisa, it's not the end of the world. Of course, if you die, you're the most important person there, but there's less pressure on the main tank's shoulders now, I feel, and it's a little bit more balanced with the other roles such as DPS, and what supports you're running is equally now as important. So I think in this meta, main tanks are still important, but it's not as, if you don't have a good main tank, you're basically a bad team. I think now it's really important to have still a good main tank.
Well, I know a really good main tank, and I'm talking to her right now. Everyone at home.
Geez.
Yeah.
Oh,
LemonKiwi kicked my butt on Orisa when we were playing with some of our casting crew, and man, it was annoying. She was an unmovable force. So if there's any contenders teams out there, if this casting thing's gonna work out for you, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you're a solid Orisa, my friend. I'm excited to see what you can do on a Sigma. But let's go back to the Gauntlet now that we talked about Tsitsi. And so the Gauntlet is very near and dear to our hearts. You've gotten to cast a lot of these teams. You've gotten some Chinese casting done. You casted Korean contenders, and you're always in the chat when it comes to North American contenders. I love seeing you there. You're one of the people who truly support Tier 2 Overwatch, and we definitely thank you for that. But really, this is kind of like, hey, who you got here? So we know that Korea is the favorite, but out of these teams that have qualified, and I'm just going to go ahead and run through them just so everyone at home knows. So for North America, Atlanta, Envy, XL2, and Legion in that order of seeding made it from North America. Europe is HSL. PAC is Talon. And I was talking to AVRL last week, and he said Talon is like a mid-tier Korean team in his opinion, so they might potentially be able to get some upsets. And I think they could challenge XL2 and Legion at the showdown. And for China, it's LG Huya, which is actually a really cool story because they're the reason why China lost a spot at the Pacific Showdown, and so they're going to be taking in the end, hopefully representing
redemption.
Really well. Yeah, and the only region not with our Gauntlet spots taken just yet is South Korea. And so, in your opinion, do any of these teams that I listed have a shot at taking down these Korean teams?
Oof. If anyone watched the Gauntlet seeding matches that, by the way, your man Boop casted Atlanta and Envy, man, that match was super good. But that also just showed you how much farther ahead Atlanta is in terms of their grasp on the meta. The May Reaper is so clean from them. And I've talked to Atlanta, and they kind of, I wouldn't say they barely scrim, but they're a team that are so confident that they haven't felt really challenged in NA. And now, of course, the perfect golden season might statistically tell you that. But Atlanta 100% is going to be the team to watch at the Gauntlet. I can easily see them beating any Korean. Well, we'll have to see which Korean teams move up before I say easily. We'll have to see which ones squeak by. In Talon, I was very happily surprised to see them move up. I just remember that in Showdown, I believe they had a pretty surprising performance even against the Chinese teams. So LG Huya, it's their chance to have redemption. And if they don't, then they'll have double the blame and double the
then everything is their fault at that point in time. Yeah. And the interesting thing is it's so funny how different, not funny, it's actually really interesting how different a lot of these teams play the same kind of meta, right? And let's talk about Atlanta just a little bit, because I think if anyone in North America and beyond do take on a Korean team, I think they're probably going to be the most prepared to do so. And, we saw on Twitter, they're scrimming against some of the Owl teams, and I think that's definitely definitely going to help them and their cause at the Gauntlet, because that's that level of play that you really need to go up against. And so one thing, though, is that North America has statistically, outside of the Showdown, Atlantic Showdown, do terribly at international events. And, with the jet lag, and, if I were them too, and if I was coaching them, I'd hope they have some fun while out there as well. But this is a longer tournament, right? This is replacing a contender season. And so over a long period of time, do you think that benefits a team like Atlanta, or do you think that kind of might take away some of their luster throughout this tournament?
So Atlanta having to travel all the way to Korea, I don't know if it'll really affect them. I mean, there's some younger sort of baby players on the team, but Sugar Free's pretty young, and maybe I don't think there's any age limit rules there, but of course World Cup has those. And like we kind of talked about burnout already, but I think the LAN environment will almost give a sort of confidence to a lot of teams to have their fans in the crowd, and maybe certain players who don't have any LAN experience might introduce more nerves. And like you said, there's always some teams that perform just amazingly online, but just suck butt at LAN, and
Scientific
you have no
term.
idea why.
Yes,
they suck butt.
Yeah.
It's a Christian Minecraft server here, so maybe Atlanta will get hit by that LAN curse, but I think they'll rock.
When I think of a team that benefits from LAN, I think of Atlanta. I think I'm going to go ahead and put all of my hopes and dreams on this team. I have to root for a North American team. It's the region I cast for. So if I pick someone else, I feel like I'd be cheating on North America. And so I don't want that to weigh heavily on my heart. So I actually think Atlanta could take this thing. And I think the fact that it is a longer tournament over a longer period of time, they're going to be able to feel what it's like to be in Korea and, get used to that environment a little bit. And it's at the Giga Arena where OGN has a lot of their stuff. And that's just such a great experience. And they're going to come back even better coming into the contender season for 2020. Can you believe it's 2020 almost, by the way?
And Envy too, I think there's still a chance for them to get better. I mean, I know their issue right now is I want to make sure I pull up the right player's name and not mix up anyone. I know Water from Gladiators is having some issues on the May, but Envy didn't feel like they had the same grasp of the meta. It was still a very close match besides the score line, but there's so much time for all these teams to get used to May Reaper and to develop their own meta to May roster. I actually don't know the rules about the roster changes, so I won't say that. And even Mufin. And anyway,
so Mufin's on Uprising Academy now. And
now he moved over, right?
The other team that I think could be interesting, and I might get skewered for this, is Legion. They've got Korean players, and so they're going to be at home on a LAN environment, and they were getting better throughout the playoffs. They did get spanked in the finals, though, like in the last couple of days. So we'll see how it goes for them. I think a lot of the North American teams are successful, but if you had to pick two, it's Atlanta and Envy. That's what it's been like all season.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we would put our hopes. So if you're a betting man, you're betting on Korea. If you're going with your heart, right, you're probably going for Talon or HSL or Atlanta. But really, can't sugarcoat it. The Korean teams are definitely the favorite in Seoul. They have home field advantage as well. And so let's move on to our next section, because we talk about Overwatch a lot. We'll talk about Overwatch a little bit more coming up, but I like to call this, wait, that's not Overwatch. It's a time where we get to talk about other interests of ours that, kind of create that make us more complete people. We have other passions, and something that we both share actually is we both have education backgrounds. Something that I think is really cool, and maybe not a lot of people know, is that you teach a college course. I believe it's biology or it's science related, right? Yeah. And so tell us about that and how you got into teaching.
So I moved to America not too long ago, a year or two or something ago, and kind of thought, well, casting's nice, doesn't pay all the bills, and I should probably start working on a side resume. So if casting esports doesn't work out, I don't have this long history of just not working for so many years, because, casting, I don't think a lot of people will even know what that is. So, so I got a real job. Hey, adult jobs over at a college near me. And it's to teach biology, kind of like a first-year biology course. It's super awesome. It's like a 5-minute drive from me. Now I'm also doing online courses, so I can actually tap into my video editing skills.
Hey.
to make that interesting. So hey, it's cool to have something to fall back on. If there's kind of like a valley of no casting going on, you can still pay the bills.
Yeah, and it's always good. You always want a backup plan just in case. You can have a passion, but if you're going all in on something, you got to leave at least 1% for something else, in my opinion. And so, what I think I'm curious about. So, the age group of your students are going to be people who tend to play video games, who might watch some Overwatch. Have you been recognized by any of your students, or have they found your casting? Is that something that you're actually open about with your students?
I definitely introduce my science background, like my education, to them. And if they, hobbies is not something they really care about, they just care about if I'm maybe qualified for my job. But as students have sort of Googled me, kind of my ratemyprofessor.com, and they Google my name, my real name, everyone, it's public, is found in a lot of esports articles and casting and stuff. So people, by accidentally Googling about if I'm a bad or good professor, they found my esports stuff. And some people, I think a semester or two ago, I had like maybe 1 or 2 gamers in my class, because I would put gaming references in my slides. Like I would talk about isotope tracers, and I would put a picture of Tracer from Overwatch. And I thought that would be a cool way to relate and remember words, is through stuff you like. And this one girl, she worked or was at a gaming LAN cafe thing, and she said that Contender South America was on the screen, and she was like, oh, is that my teacher? And she brought it up to me, and it was super cool. And yeah, I'm kind of like the same age, so a lot of people see me more as their friend, and they're not kind of like weirded out like, oh, my teacher is so like trying to be hip with the kids. It's like they kind of come to me with their interests, and they see my gaming references, they bring up gaming, they bring up games they like, and they kind of see like, oh, that's Super Mario, like I get that, haha. And it's helped me relate to my students a lot better, and it hasn't been as awkward as I thought it would be, I guess.
Well, I think you actually bring up something. We'll talk about it a little bit later when we talk about Heurix, because I'm really excited about that part. But something that you're able to do is you're able to sprinkle in a lot of those kinds of references in your casting and stuff. So something that I think I'm terrible at is I'm so bad at memeing. I'm so bad at it, because what I think is funny is usually not funny for some people. I always take it like one step too far, right? I think you've got like the perfect balance of being able to just like to really speak to the younger generation. What's it like to hear that from someone? Do you agree, or is that something that you're proud of?
I mean, I've definitely gotten the same thing that you feel of, I take memes too far, or I think things are hilarious. I've actually had to teach my co-caster to fake laugh at everything he thinks might be a joke, just in case it is, because he doesn't think I'm funny about 90% of the time. So, 90% of the time he's fake laughing on cast, but I've had to teach him that so I don't look super awkward, and at least we can look awkward together. So I totally get you that. I think I'm hilarious. Not a lot of people think the same thing.
Yeah, you know how many times I've like typed something up on Twitter and been like, delete. And then I type it up again, and then I delete it, and I type it up again. It's a never-ending battle. But I'm kind of itching to start talking about some casting. So that was our little 5-minute break of that's not Overwatch. So let's talk about you. So this is going to be the interview portion. We're going to talk about LemonKiwi and start really talking about how you got here professionally, and just to give everyone a little bit of background information. So Lemon and I have actually been working together for over a year now. Actually, South America Contenders was over a year ago, and I think we can both kind of credit that season of South America Contenders. You weren't with Heurix just yet, but it was one of my favorite things I've ever done. And working with you and the rest of the team was just so fantastic. And something that I really started noticing about you is you have a really strong work ethic. You love taking notes. You love taking notes.
I love taking notes.
That is something that I really appreciated back in the day. And so when it comes to that kind of work ethic, one, if you're going to be involved in esports, you have to have it. And two, what kind of motivates you to continue working like that? Because for some people, it's easy to start procrastinating or, oh man, I'm not getting the results that I need. And you've been kind of building up your brand really, really well over the last couple months. And how do you do it, right? How do you stay on top of it like that?
I think I go by something, kind of a statement or whatever moral thing of, if you love what you do, then you'll never work a day in your life. And Overwatch and casting has always been something that I like doing, that I want to do, not that I feel like I have to do. So when I'm studying Overwatch, and it's because I love the game, I play the game, and the players and the players in the interviews I'm doing to support them, it's because I'm genuinely interested in hoping that they can get to the Overwatch League. That's why I kind of care about Tier 2 so much. It's like, it feels like that underdog scene, you know, like you're trying to prove yourself. I've always been that average student in school, and I'm never the Overwatch League or the A+ student that got all the attention. I was like the average, always trying to prove yourself person. So seeing all these people that are that work or that are playing for maybe a salary or not a great salary or maybe no salary, trying to prove themselves to get to that next level, like I really kind of resonate with that, and I relate to that, and I want to support those kinds of dreams because I had or have those kinds of dreams similar to the players in Tier 2. So it's, if you genuinely believe in something and have a real goal and you enjoy the journey, not just the destination, it never feels like work. And that's when you see people work 18 hours a day. It's not because they're go-getters or they're you know, just hard. They're trained to work hard. They just love what they do, and they see a reason in what they're doing. Because when it comes to school, like, it would take me so many days to force myself to grade essays. I hate grading essays. I have a horrible work ethic when it comes to grading and teaching stuff. But if you tell me to write a whole history about South America, contenders, Korea, I'll get you that in the next 12 hours. You know, it's work ethic, but it has to do with what you like doing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that esports is really good. It's filtering out people who aren't in it because they love it, right? Because it does end up feeling like work. And that's something that I noticed about you way early on. And it goes into a lot of other aspects. You know, you also had an awesome cosplay at BlizzCon last year.
Oh, thanks.
So
my one and only cosplay.
But like, the reason why I bring that up in work ethic, it just kind of goes to show you're all about that whole picture. And I think you're arguably the best in Tier 2, outside of Vast, because he was a former player. I think he gets a little bit of leeway here, but for you, like, I think you're one of the best at connecting to players, and something that I think is very important that you do, and something I want everyone to know, is the fact that you interview these players, because I think Tier 2 Overwatch has a really hard time putting a name to that face, right? They're just potential draftees to Overwatch League to a lot of people, and what people don't realize is there are amazing personalities, amazing people, and the personalities are so unique here too, and you help bring out those storylines, and the Tier 2 community really appreciate it. And the way that you bond with those players too is fantastic, and something that we absolutely need. And like I said, I think you're better than almost all of us at it, including myself. And so that's my thank you to you. Now I'm going to stop fluffing you up, and we're going to start talking negatively about start talking negatively about your casting partner. And so let me preface this a little bit. So Lemon and Hirix, you guys started casting together probably like 7-8 months ago, I would say. It was probably like right after that South American Overwatch season.
Yeah, kind of around there. I don't actually know how long.
That's how important he is to you. And so, so just
our anniversary.
So whenever you've got Hirix and Lemon in the same Discord channel or chat, they're absolutely terrible to each other. It is acidic in the way they talk to each other. I mean, like, Lemon makes fun of him and his hair because he's balding, and Hirix will call Lemon fat, and I, like, in my mind, I'm like, I think it's hilarious, but like, how does it feel to be a part of that, right? So we were talking a little bit about it before the show, but yeah, walk us through that relationship, because I think it's really interesting.
I don't even know how that started, but because I've always wanted to be more friends with my co-caster, because other co-casters I've had, like, super cool people, but we wouldn't hang out outside of casting. And you know, like, you're almost best friends with Ham, and it's so important to have that relationship. So we kind of got to know each other, and we noticed that we both really have dark humor, like really, really dark humor, that then we just started like projecting. We just started projecting that dark humor onto each other. It started off with like I'm not going to say the words we're calling each other. It started with the B word, and then his hairline, I would start with that. Always these mild things, but you might think that's really messed up. Maybe you guys have some type of friendships at home with somebody where you roast them and it's okay. I have those days where, as a woman, I just don't want to be made fun of in my appearance, but it kind of knocks you down a notch, not only in you don't ever want to get too confident, but it helps us that we're really harsh with each other maybe in real life and as a joke, but also we have that transparency that we're not going to hold anything back, so that if there's something he doesn't like about my casting or his casting, or there's something I really want to do and maybe I would tiptoe around this kind of criticism with anyone else, I can just straight up tell him, like, this was just not a good day for us. I didn't like that you did this and this and that, and he does the same thing with me. And because I feel like we were so harsh and honest and true and we're close friends now, we've been able to improve better than other people where I felt maybe more shy to tell them how to improve because people get offended. But now that we don't get offended by anything, we could say anything.
Well, I think that if there's going to be any new casters coming up, you guys are probably on a deck. Hopefully,
thank you.
Hopefully, I gotta say, hopefully not over him and I. But other than that, it's
with
actually
you guys. I don't want your job.
Actually,
I want a job. Please.
Actually, something I think about frequently, Lemon, is I want that South American Overwatch feeling again.
Please,
right? I would love
so
to work with you guys, just like in general, because I had like that. I said it already once, but working with you and Hurix at a later date, you guys just get it, right? And that was the thing I think about when it was like Ham and I and everyone else in South America, is we were all grinding, like we were all hard grinders.
You guys worked like a lot too, and I think that's why we got you, like your pair and our pair just got along way better than everyone else, is that we had notes, you guys had notes, you guys wanted to talk about stories, we were all about stories and making the players shine and on the spotlight, and I think that's why like we loved working with you guys just as much as vice versa.
And so hopefully one day it'll happen. We shall.
One day.
I really hope so. Again, it's good to just like have that kind of community, especially when it came to South American Overwatch, because it's already a region that a lot of people don't watch, and to be able to evangelize that region so well with other people, and to hear you talk about it, or hear Ham or Hurix talk about it, I'm not in my head going, oh, they don't really know. I know you guys know and love it, and you guys are good to evangelize all of that stuff. And so enough about Hurix. Actually, no. Let's do one more thing. What is your favorite insult that you have ever given to Hurix, and what is your favorite that you've ever received?
So think of my most PG ones. So I've been doing this recently in Korean casts of when I close out, I do my thank yous, and maybe you've heard this, maybe not, but I'd be like, oh, thank you, all these hard workers behind Elohel or Broadcast GG, wherever, and then our analysts, and then Hurix just for existing. And then I'll close the broadcast right there. Also, I've said thanks, Hurix, for just existing in that tone. I've said my favorite alien from Area 51, or the alien I stole from Area 51 because he has such a big head. Or I've been like, Doomfist uppercuts his hairline. I've said that 2 or 3 times. I have to come up with something new because I've used that one too many times. And Hurix makes fun of me for my food tastes. So I like American food. I like gravy, I like pizza, I like burgers, whatever. And Hurix always makes fun of me. Even to my boyfriend on Twitter, he'll just be like, "Oh, cover that pizza with KFC gravy and LemonKiwi's good to go." Or
I've heard him call you uncultured a couple times.
Yeah, because I like my Subway, I like my McDonald's, I like bad food. I don't know why, I just do. And Hurix makes fun of me, and because we've had the burger debate between him and I love McDonald's. I'm still getting introduced to American burgers, so whatever, but he will always make fun of me. Oh, and he also makes fun of the fact that Billy cooks in my boyfriend cooks in the relationship. So he's always saying that Billy's my caretaker, and he just calls me so many things, and he brings my partner into it. And my partner thinks it's hilarious. Now I have 2 versus 1. So, it's all okay. It's fine. I'll get him back. I'm better at it, actually.
That is maybe true. I don't know. I don't know. I think I might be on that side with you, Jen. I think so. That would be really funny if we ever had a roast for a caster. That'd be great Overwatch League content as well. Yeah, the roast of Monte Cristo. That'd be sick. Anyway, so now let's talk about a little bit more about Tier 2. Something I said a little earlier is how involved you are with the community. You connect with the players more so than a lot of other Tier 2 community members do, not just in casting, but in general. And basically, just kind of what are you doing now? Now that the contender season is over, you've got a little bit more of Korean contenders to go through, but there's going to be a little bit of a lull. Do you have anything planned for the later stages of this year?
Yeah, so I know that so many casters and even players are dreading the off season. Like we're all gonna be homeless in boxes somewhere. So I'm dreading this as much as everyone else. So I've been trying to come up with a lot of ideas and projects for the off season. Some that I can't talk about. And I can't even drop any hints. So there's just off-season things that I'm working on that I can't talk about. And there are some things that I'm trying to work on, like maybe Carter and other players. I'm trying to get together and have some pugs. I know weekly pugs are something a lot of players enjoyed and maybe have it casted or not. I'm still working through who would be interested in that and how would that all work. And an open division is going to be around the corner, but that's still far away. So off-season stuff like pugs and other projects, and Korean contenders thankfully is going to end in at least it's the last to end, so I don't have to wait as long. But and then I don't know what I'm gonna do, Boop. I have some teaching and some content, but it's just like, oh no.
I know. Like, I don't think any of the casters know just yet if we're going to Showdown or Gauntlet or not. But I'm assuming that ZP Nevast will be going, and fingers crossed, since we got an extra seat, maybe we can get an extra casting pair as well, please. But I think in the end, let's talk things out. Maybe we could do something fun together. We were talking about it a little earlier, and I think that'd be great to bring back up. And now we've entered, this is always my last question, and it's something I like asking everyone on the show, because Overwatch is one of the most passionate communities out there, and it's one of the communities that I feel most comfortable being in and being myself in, and I just love I love Overwatch in general, and I know you do too, but I want to know why.
Yeah.
Why Overwatch?
It's weird because when I first discovered Overwatch, so I came from Call of Duty, where it's like war game, it's kind of realistic physics and people and maybe not the real story, but it just came from more of a realistic shooter. And then when how I met my partner and how we kind of started dating was because he introduced me to Overwatch, and that's kind of what we played together. But I was like, oh, cartoony, colorful shooter that's kind of fantasy-ish and all kinds of crazy. I don't know about that. I don't know. And then I played it, and I saw how much diversity there was in the characters. And it took forever for Call of Duty to even get female characters that you can play. And then Overwatch comes with half the list being female. And then there's animals, there's hamsters and monkeys and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I felt like the game caters to a wide audience of casual players. People who suck at aiming can still play this game. People who are really good at aiming can play this game. And all different types of playstyles. If you're the aggressive person, if you're the laid-back person. I just felt there was a character for everyone to play with. And I like team-based games. It's kind of why I started playing Call of Duty. But Overwatch is like that times 10. And yeah. That's kind of it, the characters and all that.
Yeah, so you went over like why you like the game, and I totally agree with you. I think the representation thing is something that is not something that is like said, but it's good just to see, right? Like there's I'm half Korean, right? And there's a movie on Netflix recently that had a half Korean family in it, and I was like, wait a second. This is the first time I think I've seen a half Korean person in a movie, right? And it was like really cool to see, and it makes you feel good, right? It's just good to have, and I think that kind of transitions over to the community. So you like the game because of a lot of that representation, but in terms of community and community involvement, you're obviously very passionate about it. What makes this community so special to you as well?
There's also a big age difference between, so now talking about the difference of Overwatch as an esport compared to others, I'll start off with the age difference. So Call of Duty was always much younger, like 14, 12 in that area, so super young, which means a little bit more immature, a little bit more toxic, mostly male dominated, and you kind of walk into an Overwatch community where when you have a more diverse game, you have a more diverse community, so felt like the female involvement wasn't super weird, right? It wasn't weird to be a female playing this game, so that was already more welcoming for me. The age, felt like it varied, but because it's a game that requires some amount of skill, I felt like there's more players my age or older than the kid audience, so that was cool. And as an esport, I felt like Overwatch always had developers that cared. And I know this gets criticized by the community, and I really don't relate or understand to that, because I felt like as a community we are heard. When there's, like, for example, the Mercy, like, 6-man res, like, the community didn't like that, and over time that got changed. Brigida community didn't like the Brigida's kit, that got nerfed and changed around. And I felt like the developers were a lot more responsive to the community's feedback than other games where I felt the developers had a direction for where they wanted the esport in the game to go, and that's what they stuck with, and they never really listened. And bugs always got fixed with Overwatch. Like, I've been involved in other esports communities where you'd have like a game-breaking bug still live for several months, which would affect your tournament play. In Overwatch, I don't think there's ever been a bug that's been drastically bad, minus that 10-year Unco pause that we had recently. I don't know what that was about. So me being able to believe in the developer and the direction where this game and esport is going has been really gratifying and really nice for me to believe in the vision of the game and the esport and the community as a whole. Obviously, I relate more to the tier 2 scene, but it's been really welcoming for women and anyone to participate in the community, whether you're obviously if you're lower ranked, you know, your opinions have to be kept in a certain in a certain bubble, but I felt like the community has been a lot friendlier. Of course, every game has its toxicity levels and it has their issues, but the reporting system with Overwatch is a lot better than other games I've seen. Of course, maybe it's not the best, but it's better than the games I've been to. So that's already a million times better. And me being involved is just because I love the game and I can see myself playing this even when I'm not casting. And that's why it's been so important for me to be involved with the community and its development and believing in the developers to help with that.
Man, super well said, Lemon. It's been awesome to have you. It's been awesome to have you on. And you know what I like to say is, we see it on Twitter. We see a lot of the negative stuff, and people will report and everything. But for every bad egg out there, in my opinion, in this community, there's 5 other eggs that are as brightly colored as an Easter egg, right? And there's always someone else there who can weigh it out. It's all about just knowing when to say something and standing up for the people around you. I think is really, really important. But in the end, I think that doesn't happen as often as I think some people think it does in this community. And so thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you again for being on the show. So where can we find you on social media, Miss LemonKiwi?
It's the LemonKiwi on YouTube or LemonKiwi with an underscore on Instagram and Twitter, and that's where I hang out. And make sure you support #support tier 2 with OW Path to Pro on Twitter, and make sure you follow the conclusion of Korean Contenders Playoffs.
And you're probably going to be around for that one too. So definitely check out Lemon and Helix Casting. Again, I think they're on tap. If there's any opening in Overwatch Contenders, it's going to probably go to them, please, once more. And so I'm so excited to see where your career is going to go and how our continued interaction, maybe we could do something cool a little bit later. But once again, thank you for coming on. And for everyone at home, that's been what's going on in Overwatch lately. We'll see you next week.